Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend and Publish, and welcome to episode 107, Mapping Writing Projects to Your Semester. In this episode, which is a companion to episode 105, where I mapped out spring 2023 semester writing time, I talk about how I know what projects to work on during this particular semester. So one of the takeaway lessons, I think, from past episodes for Defend and Publish is that academic writing, the types of projects, the types of time you do writing, changes all the time. And it's very subject to the way that we work in the academic workplace. So for example, my schedule for teaching is completely different than it was in the fall. So the writing schedule that I had in the fall can't necessarily be the same as what I have now in a spring semester. I have different classes, I have different responsibilities. Just the nature of academic work, you might pick up a committee that only meets in the spring. You might be on a kind of a temporary situation with a particular class or administrative role. And if you're a graduate student, you might go from having coursework to becoming ABD and having to map out more writing time. So I like to think about writing in terms of two ways. I try to think about it in terms of time. So when am I going to actually do writing? But also, what am I going to work on during those writing times? Because I think those two things go together. And for me, at least, they shift constantly based on the academic time and schedule available. So in episode 105, what I did was I talked through how I know when I'm going to write during the spring 2023 semester when this is being recorded. And if you want to see how to do that or how to figure out how to map out writing time, I talk about it in that episode, but there's also a great visual example in episode 102. So if you want to check that out on YouTube or listen to the audio for it, I basically talk about how I know where writing can go and where it can't go. So those are both episodes to check out. Both 102 and 105 work on that end of the equation. But today's episode is going to focus on how I know what writing projects to slot into a semester once I know the writing time that I have available. And so for today, what I'm going to do is show a couple of slides, but if you're listening to this on audio only, you don't necessarily need these particular slides because it's a pretty simple process. But for those of you on YouTube, I'm going to go ahead and share just a few notes here that I think might be useful. So if we think about mapping projects to writing time, I mentioned there's two phases to this. So phase one is really blocking off all non-writing days that you have in your calendar. I mentioned checking out episode 102. You can also check out episode 105 to hear a little bit more about this. There's more stages to it than that, but essentially what I'm trying to get a grip on is when am I actually going to write during this particular semester? And so for me, as an academic in the US, my semester started January 9th of 2023, and it ends roughly the first week in May. So I'm only looking at that time period. I've kind of figured out what days and times I can write. I've already blocked them on my calendar. Certainly we all know that calendar interruptions can happen. So I also want to refer you to an episode, which I'll link in the show notes, about how to get your writing back after an interruption. Because even though I blocked out 9 to 11 to get some writing done, and I really want to get writing done, maybe that isn't going to happen that day. My car breaks down. I have a sick child at home. We all know things happen. So I will also link that episode in our show notes because I think that's a really useful one to just see how to get that time back so you don't lose an entire writing day. But the second part for me is being very strategic in what types of writing projects I'm going to work on this semester. So what I'm talking about today is really the second phase of how do I map the projects to the semester writing time that I have. And so I'm really looking at that 16-week period. And as just a quick review, this particular spring, I have a nicely set schedule, a little bit better than what I had in the fall. In the fall, I had some writing times that were a little bit all over the place, but in general, I'm able to write 9 to 11 in the morning, Mondays through Thursdays, and then 11 to 1 on Fridays. At the moment in my career, I'm mid-career, I'm a full professor. I have a much more control over my schedule. When I was an assistant professor, I had basically what it looked sort of like a bingo card where I had, classes in different slides or different time frames during the day. So, if this is you and you have to write in a very fragmented type of system, we have an upcoming workshop about that will be happening in February. So that's something that you can stay tuned and listen on our podcast to talk about a little bit more. But certainly if you have to write in these very small time slots and fragmented times, I'll have more information to share about that in an upcoming workshop. So stay tuned to listen for that. Right now, though, I will say this, that's my sort of general schedule. I have it blocked on my calendar, but there are plenty of days that it is not actually happening that way. So for example, on a random Monday in February, I know I can't write between 9 and 11. So that particular day, I might have slotted in 2 half-hour times and then an hour time, and none of it is during my regular time frame. So just in general, I'm putting this out there just so you can see that I'm working with about 10 hours a week. That's always the goal that I try to hit during a semester. So 10 hours a week of writing. For some of you, you might need 15 or 20, particularly if you're working on a dissertation or something like that. But for me, this is what I can manage with my teaching load, my administration, and so on. So how I knew what to work on was it was really a result of two different things. One is this idea of project mix. So I have an upcoming podcast episode on project mix where I'll talk about all different kinds of projects you might throw into your project mix for the semester. But for me, this particular semester, I'm looking to have a variety of projects in here. One is a completion project. So that's a project I want to get completed this semester. So for me, I've mentioned in several episodes, I've been working for a very long time on a book on time use diary data. So to me, that's my completion project. It's getting finished this semester. So one way or another, it is getting finished. For lots of reasons, there's lots of things happening with that book right at the moment that I need to kind of finish off and be finished with. So that's going to be the completion project. An ongoing project is something I won't get completed during the semester, but I need to keep making forward progress. And for me, that's actually not an academic project I'm working on. Obviously, I am an academic, but I run this podcast. I run a writing coaching company now. So for me, I've needed to do some content for our brand new Defend, Publish, and Lead website. And so that content has to be prioritized. It's time. We need to get our website up for everyone. So for me, I'm putting that in as one of my projects this semester. And normally, for those of you that are doing extra side hustles or businesses, let me say just one quick thing about that. I did have a client ask me about how I manage time to work on this business, and is that part of writing time? That would be actually a great podcast episode in the future. So hopefully I'll throw something out like that. But for right now, I just want to say the short answer is normally no. So when I'm talking about 10 hours of writing time a week, I'm working on my academic writing projects. I'm not working on anything for the company. But this particular semester, because again, time sensitive nature, and I really want to use my very focused writing time to write this content, I'm making an exception to get some of this website content done. So that's an ongoing project. And then I have two other projects. One is a time sensitive I call it time sensitive / or short-term project. Which for a lot of people that are working with this kind of a category tend to be things like a conference presentation or a workshop you have to do. I have a workshop that I need to finish making for a university on February 10th. Yes, that's a little bit business work too, as well. Also kind of falls into my academic realm of doing presentations. So for me, it kind of overlaps, but that's a project I'm going to do. And then a new project I'm working on is I have some data about the graduate student transition to faculty writers and how they become faculty writers. I've got, some notes, I've got some data, but I really need to start generating that into an article. So that'll be a new project. So episode 108 will cover the different types of projects in a project mix. I mentioned it's an upcoming episode. I had to kind of check to see what number it was. It's 108, so it'll be the one right after this one. If you want to hear about all kinds of projects. And one other thing about a project mix, just to put out there for this particular discussion, for me, I'm very strategic in the types of projects I throw into the mix. I'll say more about that in episode 108, but on the next slide, I'm going to show a little map of how I decided when I'm going to work on certain projects. And a lot of times that's how the project mix gets determined, because it's a little bit on the time you have available, what you can get accomplished, what your energy level is, and so on. So I'll say more about that in episode 108. But this particular project mix, I just want to point out, it's not that I just always pick a completion project or I always pick an ongoing project. No, I'm actually looking at, all right, this semester looks relatively calm. I need to get a couple of things done. These are some things that need to be accomplished this semester. There's a lot of reasons why I pick what I pick. And I think it'll make more sense when I flip to the next slide that I'm showing on the screen that just says, what am I going to work on and when? And part of this is mapping your projects to your writing time. But the other part of it is just making some rules for yourself about writing. And you can call them guidelines, you can call them routines, however you want to phrase this. But for me, I just made some very simple rules about how I want to work through my writing projects in the 16-week semester. So the completion project I mentioned, I want to finish this book manuscript revisions. I want to, get that project off of my plate. So for me, I have decided all of my writing sessions, so all 10 hours a week until January 31st are going to be devoted to that project, because I know I can knock it out by then. I know I can get it off my plate by then. So those 10 hours, I'm not working with multiple projects. So project mix is a little bit about thinking about multiple projects. For some people, there is no project mix. They just work on their dissertations. But the reality of academic life is that a lot of us are juggling more than one thing. So for me, I'm just going to have this very single-minded focus to work on just that completion project through January 1st. It's just a couple of weeks. Normally I work on more than one project at a time, but I've decided, nope, I'm going to use every single time. And if I get finished more quickly, then great. I'll start on, number 2. The second thing I'm going to do after I finish that completion project, so after January 1st, so February 1st, between February 1st and February 10th, if you remember, I had that short-term project I talked about. I need to do a workshop on February 10th. So for this particular semester, again, normally I juggle multiple projects, but for this semester, I'm going to use that 10-day period to just prep for that workshop and have a little bit of calmness in writing, because I can sort of afford to this particular semester. So that will be the second project. But then after February 10th, I kind of look at this as more of a normal semester for me, where I'm juggling more than one thing. So once those 2 projects are taken care of, then I'm going to go to a rule. And this is where the rules come into the play. But what I'm going to work on is from Monday, on my writing sessions, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I'm going to work on the new article, writing the new article. And on Thursday and Friday, I'm going to work on web content. So this is a little bit more typical for me, where I might work, 4 days a week on project A or whatever my priority project is. I might work on something that's coming up in a couple of months, like a conference presentation in April. I might do a little bit of that each week. And project mix will explain this, I think, a little bit better. But for this particular semester, for me, in terms of time, at least it made sense for me to kind of knock out 2 of the 4 projects right away. One of those is that completion project, which will be done by January 31st. The second one is that workshop, which will be completed and over by February 10th. So it's not like that project's going to be sitting around in my deck of projects that I need to do over the course of the semester. Now, that being said, I will have that nice satisfied feeling of checking off those 2 tasks on my list. But the 2 other projects I'm working on, my ongoing project, which is working on this website content, and then working on a new article on graduate student writers, neither one of those projects will probably be finished this semester. Our new website for the company will definitely be up before the end of the semester. But in my mind, web content a lot of times changes. It needs to be revised. It needs to be updated frequently. So for me, I'm going to keep that as an ongoing project. I won't be able to say, well, I wrote all the content and I put up a new website. Check, I'm finished. Certainly for a lot of hypertext projects, it just doesn't work that way. So I know for me, that will be an ongoing semester project I'll have to revisit from time to time. So hopefully that helps you think through how you might map writing projects to the semester. I also want to throw out something to you because sometimes I will get people that will listen to the episodes and say, can somebody do that with me? And yes, at Defend and Publish, we do this kind of planning all the time. So many of our visitors come to us, they only work with us once, maybe, or twice, where we actually talk about planning a semester, where we really look at what has to get done and where can it go. And many times we'll draft a template right there live, or we'll make something that you can use as a resource going forward. So something customized to you. And if that's something you're interested in, you certainly can email me at Christine@defendandpublish.com. Happy to answer questions about that. But writing coaching sessions with us can do that kind of work too. And so we have many clients that we see once a semester. We might see them for a half hour every semester just to kind of touch base about what's happening. And then, we don't talk to them again until they need us. So just putting that on your radar. And then also, while we're talking about resources, I also want to make sure that I mention our partnership with the Textbook and Academic Authors Association. One of the resources I have for you today is, again, in response to a client question. So this is something that we get a lot of times from graduate students or new faculty on the tenure track. And the question is this: it's basically that they need to show that they're doing professional community service or professional service of some sort. And they want to know, how am I able to be on a professional committee, or how am I able to do a manuscript review? I don't know anybody. How does somebody get to do that kind of work? So at a later date, we will talk on the podcast about how to do the manuscript side of things, or reviewing conference proposals. But on the committee side, many organizations, such as the TAA, offer opportunities for faculty to volunteer for a committee. So if this is something you need, or you're interested in branching out, if you're really interested in academic writing, because I know I've got some faculty developers on the podcast that listen, this is something that would be, I think, a remarkable opportunity and pretty easy to get involved. So if you're interested, if you look at the TAA committees on their website, you can see there's some notes about how you can get involved if you want to, if you're interested in doing some volunteering. I kind of put a little link to it, or I'm kind of highlighting a link on the screen for people. It's at the bottom of the screen that I'm sharing. But if you go to TAA and search for committees, you'll be able to find it. And don't forget, we do have that $10 off discount code. If you have never bothered to look at how cheap it is to join the TAA, let me say something. In spring of 2023, at the moment, as a faculty writer, as an academic author, it would only be for a year $100 for me to join. So with a $10 discount off, that's $90 per year. That right now is the cheapest academic organization membership that I have. Out of all the memberships that I have, that is the cheapest one. So graduate students, it's only $50 for you. So with $10 off, it's $40. And I've mentioned many times, which we cover in the podcast episodes, that under resources, there's just a bank of videos, there's templates, there's all these other things. So at least for me, I belong to the TAA because I can't get the content about how to be an academic writer, or to strengthen writing skills or presentation skills in one organization anywhere else in this kind of a format. So definitely a value, but I know that some people had asked me a few things about it. And I had mentioned on this podcast long ago, we don't have very many sponsorships. We don't do ads on this podcast. We don't have any of that kind of stuff, because I really don't want it interfering with just some quick writing tips. But I do strongly believe in this organization for those kinds of resources they provide all in one space. So if you're interested in doing it, and you want to get that $10 off, the code is, this is all capital letters, TAADP10, and it's all put together. So please consider doing that. I'll put that link in the show notes. And I am very happy to have shared these tips and strategies with you today. I also want to throw it out there to anybody listening. If you've got an idea for a podcast episode, or just a question you want me to address, walk through, I'm happy to do it. We're getting a lot more of our content ideas from clients, but also from podcast listeners. So if you want to suggest one, you can email me or drop it to us on Twitter, and we're happy to hear from you. Happy writing, everyone.